right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Zoom First Friday. My name is Kristen Skinner, and I'm the Executive Director here at Laboratory. Laboratory is an interactive artist residency program located in the heart of downtown Spokane, Washington. I just want to make sure I have everyone in here. Sorry, one moment. Okay, perfect. So before I introduce our artists, I would like to acknowledge the Arcos Foundation for Arts for their micro grant given to our artists for this residency. This micro grant serves as a memoriam for and honors the names of Tony McDade, Dominique Fells, Ria Milton, 3 Black queer individuals murdered earlier this year. I would like to take this time to hold a moment of silence for each of these individuals. If you could please join me, we're going to take a 10-second moment of silence. Thank you so much. Now, I'd like to take this time to introduce our residents, LaJuné McMillian, Ntu, and Saint A. Each of our artists will present individually, and then at the end, we're going to hold a Q&A session moderated by our resident assistant, Sarah Torres. If you have questions you'd like to ask the artist, please utilize this chat feature in the lower right hand of your screen. And when asking a question, make sure that your to section is to everyone and not to a private individual that may be speaking on the screen. Okay, our first resident to present is LaJuné McMillian. LaJuné is a new media artist and creative technologist creating art that integrates performance, virtual reality, and physical computing to question our current forms of communication. 1 second.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so just to echo that, I'm going to share my screen and take you through who I am. So yeah, I'm LaJuné, and I work primarily with performance and with movement through installation art, through also performance art, really merging all of these different spaces to sort of just create new worlds, to question the world that we live in, and to sort of just like push us forward. So yeah, I started this work while I was still in school, and when I left school, I realized that my access to these spaces was very limited. And so I began to question how I could challenge this and begin to build spaces for myself and for others to make work like this for now and for the future. And so, basically in the past few years, a lot of access to these tools, to 3D base models, to software, to make animation yourself, has basically and the ability to make and finish polished projects has become easier for many. And while these resources are extremely helpful to create a range of projects, they lack tools to create diverse characters and movements unexplored by systems that center assumptions of neutrality. And so I thought to create a space that's different from that, and that starts with the Black Movement Project, which has started as an online database of Black motion capture data and Black character-based models. And this approach for me was, it just made sense, but it essentially expanded from that, mainly because I realized that representation is not enough. I feel like my work with it as just a database would work to have representation in a lot of these tools. However, it wouldn't necessarily like quote unquote fix the problems that I was really interested in solving or questioning or diving deep into. And so, yeah, I began to ask a lot of questions. I wanted to really learn how to understand how Black movement embodies how Black people are already represented in the media and in the tools that we use today. And it all started with the lawsuits against Fortnite that were filed in 2018. And essentially, in this video game, a lot of dances that are culturally significant to Black culture were essentially stolen and placed into the game and for compensation. And basically, the lawsuits are on pause because the dances are not considered choreography under copyright law. And alongside that, there are already existing motion capture databases. However, this, like the back image of this is actually a GIF of Mixamo, which is an online motion capture database, but also a good tool for people who are looking into an intro to character rigging. And essentially, like there are all of the culturally specific movements that are in this library are either hard to find or they're very poorly defined, and also they don't reflect the search terms. So in the name of making it easy to use, these tools omit valuable information from users, including information about the motion capture actor provided and the movements, and important historical and cultural information about the movements as well. And so for me, I realized that to build a space out that not only archives Black movement, but celebrates it and honors it, I had to begin to think about how to build out a space that had all of these attributes. And so, yeah, more questions. How do we combat the exploitation, erasure, and dilution of Black culture and Black people? And what do cultural reparations look like? What does it mean to hold these existing tools and existing places responsible and accountable to what it means for us to be quote unquote represented in this space without being taken advantage of? So yeah, Black movement does not only represent our individual experiences, but it also represents our collective memory. It transcends space, time, and white supremacist social structures. It also allows us to connect to one another, our ancestors, our deeper selves, and it gives us a space to communicate and connect to our future. Black movement in itself is also a technology. It holds the stories of our existence across the diaspora. And our bodies and movements are more than data points and avatars. They hold our humanity. And so it's time for digital spaces, as well as all spaces that we enter to reflect that. And so what does it mean to ethically digitize Black movement? How do we protect the data that's collected? And how can it better serve and celebrate the community? How can we effectively challenge these digital tools that don't share these values and gain control and ownership over our collective future? And that's when this project evolved into a library for activists and performers and artists, as well as anyone really, to create diverse extended reality projects, a space to research how and why we move, and an archive of Black existence. And basically coming from a community approach through the use of performances, extended reality experiences, workshops, conversations, and tool making. And that brings me to the work that I've been doing at Laboratory, which is an extension of this performance that we worked on last year. I actually worked on this with Nala, who's an amazing dancer, performer, artist, as well as a music producer. And basically, we created a live motion capture projected experience that is to be seen as both a live performance and VR docuseries, which shows how Black movement has been used as a tool for the preservation of Black culture, as well as a vehicle of self-evolution. And so, yeah, I worked both with Nala Duma and also another performer and artist, Ronaldo Maurice, who is a dancer with Alvin Ailey. And yeah, we basically over the course of 4 months, I learned about their movement practices and journeys. I recorded interviews, and then together we embedded them into these soundscapes as part of another residency that happened last year. So yeah, that said, basically we used the perception neuron suit and Unreal Engine to basically send the movements from both Nala and Ronaldo to the computer over Wi-Fi. using Axis Neuron, and then through another Axis Neuron, which is a software that comes with the motion capture suite, and then through a plugin, we sent the data to Unreal Engine, which is where I created all of these digital worlds and also avatars of both Mal and Ronaldo. And so I'm going to leave that there, and I wanted to next share with you basically the video that I've been working on. So that performance, I've now taken all of those movements from that performance and I've translated it into what I'm now calling movement portraits. So yeah, so basically you'll see some of the movements from Nala, and as well as you'll hear snippets of the interview that we had together. So I'm going to come back to, I'm going to stop sharing real quick, and then I'm going to reshare my screen. And I'm going to start it from the beginning. And I'm just going to press play. Can everyone hear that? I think. Hopefully.
I produce, write, perform music. R&B, hip hop music through an experimental electronic kind of lens. The root of my art is very black, black music, black art. My whole family side. I was the only one born in the United States. They all speak Zulu. That's another thing. I think I was 10 years. But my dad is like, sports, more active. I did soccer. And then the winter came. So I thought, so I'm gonna try dance. I was like shy. We just started following. I remember. Go around, back. I remember it was all after that class, they were working on this to write. So you're waiting for like an hour and a half for just 3 minutes. They were. It was this private school, privately white, conservative. So much money. So then, traditional, all those things. Culture shock.
It's the power of nice self-love will hang me up. It fuck me up. If I try to fix myself alone, I think I'll come undone. Check. I can't carry the boss alone. And it beats how it goes the time. How it goes the time.
Straight on me like moon stresses. A black body cannot be free. Conceived. You don't want to see my father's for me.
If this is a light beams, rages the days, I take that with cream, all of your prayers. If it greets me, knows me by
Yeah, it was weird to not only protect black and empower in that space, I feel like in a lot of ways, moving to that space, artistic expression was a bit harder. very quiet, very quiet. Very new friends, I was invited to a dance show. That wasn't like, that wasn't big. That wasn't at my high school. I think what we make spaces where bodies are celebrated. Entirely out. I just really thought, you really don't know what you don't know. Peace out. Death doesn't. That's a natural progression at every. But it's nice when you've done everything you can.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna stop the share now. Yeah. So that's where it's at right now. Yeah, so basically it's like I'm really interested in just like last comments, but I'm really interested in I guess experimental approaches to documentary. Yeah, like how do you tell an artist, a performer's story in like a different and more like abstract way. So yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm gonna give it back to, hold on. Let me find you, Kristen, so that I can give it back to you. There we go, I found you. Make host. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LaJuné. That was amazing. That was so phenomenal. Yes, thank you. And I also see that we have some questions. We're going to go ahead and make note of those and then have Sarah moderate at the end of everyone's talk so we can get all those in. Okay, so next I would like to introduce our resident Ntu. Ntu is a New York-based artist, Virginia-born musician, dancer, and visual artist whose work deals with R&B, pop music, and Black futurism. I'm going to pass it over to them. Let me just make sure we don't have anybody in the waiting room. Okay, we're good. Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ntu, and I'm excited to share what I have with you today. So let's get started. I'm just gonna pull this up. Okay, so for my project, I was working on this game slash interactive ray field is what I've been calling it, called Overture 2, a Liminal Field. And the kind of beginnings of this project started with Susan Sontag. I was actually in Berlin earlier this year, and just over the past year since 2019, I was getting really acquainted with a bunch of different types of dance music. So I started reading and watching a lot about that. And in Berlin, a teacher slash artist named Colin Self. They kind of introduced me to her and her work, especially AIDS and its metaphors. And she has like a part one to that called Illness and Its Metaphors. And basically it discusses just how in human history we attribute illnesses with like certain evils. They become metaphors for that. And that's why, you know, cancer gets its name, or why things like tuberculosis are like attributed with like less painful ways of dying and things like that. And the ultimate effect of those things is that these metaphors and these significations don't allow us to deal with the actual illness being had, because once, you know, doctors started really looking at the effects of cancer, it became treatable. And then even with AIDS, which is what she explores in AIDS and Its Metaphors, that also became treatable. Yeah, so I started from that point, and there were a couple other texts that I was looking at for this piece of work. Specifically, Is the Rectum a Grave by Leo Bersani, In Defense of Disco by Richard Dyer, In Time of Plague, AIDS and Its Significations. Significations comes up a lot with this topic, but especially with the Richard Dyer piece, that was interesting because he basically explained this distinction between pop music, dance music, and rock music, and just how rock is this kind of, it's kind of the physicality, the expression of physicality, of sexuality, and then pop is like the disembodiment of that sexuality, and it's like focus of, you know, like the lyrics and it being a short form, and then dance music kind of marries like music with the body, and it's long form structure, and it's kind of it's lack of concern with, you know, lyrical or narrative structure means that, like, for the listener, it's intended that you engage with the body first and foremost. And I thought that was interesting, especially given, you know, queer people's history with dance music and dance music spaces. So that kind of area of history and of music history, which is like in the 80s when we started documenting a lot of like queer culture in nightclub spaces, and had many representations of it in film and photo and things like that. At the same time, what was happening was the US AIDS epidemic. And it was really hard, especially in this country, because at the time, when the epidemic was at its height, it wasn't taken seriously at first, and by Ronald Reagan, for reasons we know why. But what dance music provided and what these nightclubs provided was not only a space for escape, but it was also a space for people to see their queer friends, queer family, etc., alive and healthy and well. Meanwhile, this illness was really just emaciating and devastating and ugly, because it was just a rapid, you know, turn into sickness and death. And so I was thinking a lot about, okay, in these spaces, like when you're confronted with mortality so readily, and nightclubs are even spaces usually like for younger people, what is the effect of that on queer temporality and mortality? I'm thinking especially in a Black context, because that's even just a further marginalization of identity. So I was thinking about, how does time and lifetime change in these spaces that are associated with illness and death? And so what I ended up thinking about, especially now in this kind of COVID contemporary world where we can't meet each other in dance spaces, anybody, like I was thinking about, okay, what is a way to extend that experience, I guess. And I went a little bit ahead. Extend that experience, and I thought about the virtual world. And this has been coming up for a long time, especially since I worked with LaJuné on their project. I just, I kept hearing things about Unreal Engine and Unity and game design and virtual reality. And I was thinking more and more about how it can be used in a musical context. And then studying in Berlin just deepened that desire to engage with game design through music. So what I wanted to do was create like a space that was interactive with music, and it's still ongoing, through Unreal Engine. Tried Unreal Engine, didn't work, kept crashing because I own a Mac. So if the first thing I would say to anybody is, if you want to get involved with like Unreal Engine, a PC is probably going to be your best bet, because a Mac, I just wasn't strong enough to run it. So I moved to Unity for this, and this, what I'm showing you right now, is this is like the beginnings of what I started with, which was a very basic terrain. And yeah, so this is kind of like the overview. And you'll see as like we zoom in later on, and as I like take you through a walkthrough of the actual space, everything that's going on down there. But so specifically for this space, I wanted to work with my own music to create the sounds for this space. And specifically, I chose this track from an EP that I released just in May, called Overture 2. And actually, it was one of like 3 pieces that I made that was featured in LaJuné's video. And you heard like an earlier version of it. But this is the final version. And I think it'll give context for just how I'm using this music in the space. And I'll explain why I chose this song to work with afterwards.
Youngest parts of mine in melon stuck in time, they needed you much more. You work hard, that pretty house, papers in line, my mother incorrect, waiting in the eyes. I know how closeness goes. We build it up, build it up, build it up, just to break it down, 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 break it down. Build it up, what's the high, what is up without the come down. Overture to nothing more. No more dances, but when I open more to you, then all I do is pledge my heart to doubt, to more to live without. You know I have eyes that relive parts you don't like. This is why you don't care no more. Now she's in your bed, the one you shared. 911, your call. Had enough to wreck it all. I'm saying something you wanted me to watch, and I watched and watched and watched. Build it up, holstered guns, here they come, just to break it down, down, down. You love how they break it down, don't you? Build it up, what's the high? What is love without the come down? Love's a promise, right? Like cash the phoenix light. Overture to nothing ever more. No more chances when I open more to you. All I do is pledge my heart to doubts, to want to live without. See from far, see from far, see from far, see from far. So filled up with the flame of growing up, I got to know this. I let go, but I'm still on up. It's treachery in the morning. Cops came in just like a storm, just like ashes as we flown. And that's how close this goes, just how close it should.
So that's that. That's Overture 2. And actually, someone who's here right now contributed a lot to this song, Chris. He played everything you hear in piano on there. That's all him. That's his voice also at the end. And he did like an amazing job. Huge thank you to Chris. And then we also have another friend, Imani, who did vocals like all over it, the vocal in the intro, in the bridge. Just had to shout them out a little bit, you know, because yeah, I love them. But yeah, so I specifically wanted to work with this song because of just how it intimates like a kind of relationship between like the ballad and pop music, and then kind of what Richard Dyer was talking about, which is like the whole body eroticism that comes with like dance music towards the end. And just throughout my music, I want to like create a very like just bodily relationship with rhythm, and especially in pop music, which doesn't tend to be super rhythmically dynamic all the time, at least like in the Anglo-American context. And yeah, so I kind of wanted to turn that like sad ballady dance thing into something that could be like a shared space for people to engage with each other. And so, ooh, let me move out of here. And oops, let me go back to full screen. Okay, that's close enough. So yeah, but I'm gonna also talk as I walk through the actual game with you, just about where I want to head moving forward. But I was realizing that I want the project to be a bit more expansive than just this song, or exploring like the music and sounds in this song, but something that could be used to explore more music that I create, and maybe even include kind of responses to the works that I was reading in the process of making this. So Yeah, so this is where we started, very basic, like a flat piece of terrain, and I was shaping it for like hours, using these brushing tools on the side. Over time, it turned into the picture that you see on the left, a bunch of mounds, and then on the right, you can see I started to add some like dirt and grass. I wanted to base this actually off of Mlazi, which is this place in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, which is where my family's from on my mother's side. And yeah, just like the kind of drier, hilly terrain was a huge inspiration for that. So yeah, let's get into the actual game. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So as you can see, we're over this, what is now a much like spacier thing going on. And I actually did that using this thing called Skybox. And let me zoom in here so you can see a bit of the overview before I like walk into it. Just gonna take you through here. Yeah, okay, now let's actually get into it. Okay, so what we have right here at the beginning is this cube, and it's kind of just used as like a reference for scaling whatever like characters you use. And we're gonna just take a walk through this forest. Now, so this is something, this is basically like a tablet that I added here. And what happens when you like walk up to it is this. So you can hear like the music from Overture 2 start to play. And when I walk out of the bounds of it, it stops. And basically what I want to do with a lot of these kind of structures is have them be like moments where you can interact with the song. Okay, just pause for a second. I'm gonna have to go back to it. Yeah, just have them as like moments where you can interact with the song and maybe learn more about it in terms of like lyrics, who's playing, and things like that. And then we're gonna go up here to my favorite section. Yeah, and this is kind of like a waiting poolish area that I started working on towards the end of the residency. And I just had lots of thoughts about how I wanted like people to be able to interact with the environment in interesting ways and like placing the sounds in interesting spots. So it's also like a bit of like discovery for people, for things, or things for people to find. And so much of this was a learning process, and I'm about to show you a little bit of what I mean. The water looks great here. I was able to get it to move, but when you go into it, it's like there's nothing underneath. And so what I wanted to start working on towards the end of this was getting water to like also be interactive in terms of when you swim through it, does it make sounds? And actually what you see here is a capsule that I programmed some sound to. And it's cool because this is actually a little moment in the song Overture 2. I'm gonna show you what that moment is. So let me get out of here first. And then I'll take you to the rest of it. So also throughout the process, I was working in Logic, and I was, just a little bit. I was working in Logic and taking apart all these stems from the track. And that sound specifically came from right here, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So take apart pieces like that and implement them into the Ray field. And this too here, I'm gonna show you where this sound is, which is probably my favorite. Yeah, so that's all littered throughout the space. And let me go back there to just show you where it is. This is not it, but I also do want to show you like how this button thing works. There we go. And the cool thing about this is you can make the sound three-dimensional. So it's always moving in relation to your character. And as I get farther away, it gets quieter. So by the time I'm over here, you won't really be able to hear it as much. Yeah, and that is everything in this space. What was really cool to kind of figure out about this is the best way I can make it actually interesting for people to use when they're on here. And I've been thinking a lot about in collaboration and in artistic spaces, in scenes with artists. And I think it was important because, you know, I'm imagining this as kind of like a dance space, even though it's like a natural environment, even though it's outside, and it's communal in that way. I was thinking about ways that you can take apart pieces of work and really just give everybody the kind of credit and flowers they deserve. So dedicating parts of it to learning about, say, the pianist, Chris, or the vocalist, Amani, and things like that. And I think that's a good way for it to feel still personal, as like a space that I've created, but then also shared in its creation. So yeah, that's what I was working on, and I'm excited to continue working on it because I think I'm gonna start using this for a lot of projects like moving forward, and it's something that can be just updated over time. So I'm gonna hand this back to Kristen. Okay. Do I have to Kristen? This one, sure. Okay, here we go. There we go. There we go. Okay.
I got it. I reclaimed the host somehow. Sorry, y'all. This is the first time for us. It's totally fine. It wouldn't be a Zoom meeting if we didn't have tech issues, huh? Ntu, thank you so much. That was fabulous. I loved watching that. I think Unity is such an amazing program. It's always something that I've wanted to learn how to use. And yeah, it's so fun. And I just feel like with that project, you can do so many things with it, and can't wait to see what's next for you. And again, if you have questions, save them, go ahead and put them in the chat. We're taking them down, and we'll have them all at the end during the Q&A moderation. Awesome. Next, I would like to introduce Saint A. Let's see, sorry, I lost my Saint A is an experimental audiovisual performance artist who resides in New York City. They explore spirituality, self-identity, and sexuality to create new realms and worlds that are vivid and ethereal. And I'll pass that over to you. Perfect, thank you.
Cool. Hi, I'm Saint A. I'm an audiovisual artist, and I have a background in 2D art and film, and I also produce and kind of bring that all together to create my visual art and the work that I'm doing. And so normally I'm based in New York. Right now I'm back home with my parents in Wisconsin. So that also has influenced a lot of the visuals that I've made for this project. They've kind of been more reflective as well of like my past, and also nature induced, given that we kind of live surrounded in a very secluded area. So I'm just gonna share my screen and get the PowerPoint up. Okay. And, oh, wait, hold on. I'm gonna stop share real quick, I think, just to make sure I have the audio set up. Sorry about that. Okay, cool. Okay, so, all right, for my project, it was titled Sex with Me for Laboratory Residency, which explores body memory and how, what that looks like to me, and sort of how we kind of move throughout life collecting these memories onto our body, and that in turn influences the relationships we build, the experiences we make with people, and ultimately kind of how we connect. And so I was sort of looking at like, what are my memories? How do they influence how I view my body and also how I move through the world? And in turn, how does that allow me to understand myself more, but also be a more empathetic individual to the other people around us? And sort of asking that question, like, do we carry everything forever, or does time sort of heal all wounds? And also like that idea of like the altered version of yourself. So when coming up with this project, I was sort of reflecting on how I was going through some stuff in my life, and I was riding the train and going around a turn, like I immediately got like a tight feeling in my chest and a tugging in my stomach. And that was something that I never really had experienced before. And so that sort of fermented in my head for a while. And then I revisited an old docu project a friend made, which was a video of me explaining the different associations with the body parts, my own body parts. And I sort of was like, okay, I kind of like that. It's ping-ponging around in my head. And I recently then began to start reading some texts about eroticism, sexuality, and like Black sexuality. And that sort of led me to ultimately the basis for my project. So the first book that kind of really did it for me was, I don't know if you have your speaker view up window, but it's called Funk the Erotic by L.H. Stallings. It's about trans aesthetics and sexual cultures in funk music and in the funk movement. And so in the essay Super Freaks and Sites of Memory, L.H. Stallings kind of talks about this idea of a neutral sexuality and how androgyny doesn't assume a norm for sexuality, and Black communities' articulation of freak and sexual magic ensures the reproduction of beings capable of sustaining communal eroticism and ecstasy where there are no men and women. And also the idea of like Black ecstasy and a Black orgy is one of a communal space of like healing. So I kind of was taking that idea alongside with Audre Lorde's essay, The Power of the Erotic, and how they describe the erotic as sort of feeling deeply. So in this quote here, in her essay, she says, for once, we begin to feel deeply all the aspects of our lives. We begin to demand from ourselves and from our life pursuits that one feeling in accordance with that joy, which we know ourselves to be capable of. And Audre Lorde also describes the pornographic as the sort of the stimulation of feeling without really feeling. So that was sort of something I was taking into my work, and sort of kind of also I've noticed bounces back to some older projects I did, like this one called Truth versus Sex, which again, I've noticed I'm very interested in how these relationships we build with people are just as intimate or can be less intimate with the idea of like sex, which is something we often hold up to be either something void of all feeling and emotion or super intense emotion. So that's sort of when I began starting my project. And when I do a lot of my work, I sort of do a bunch of research and sort of kind of brain fart all over the place with what I'm thinking about and what I can think will relate. So I kind of started with something that seemed pretty obvious, was like trauma. We know that trauma can alter the way the human body operates, basically. So I started looking at childhood trauma and how like people who have childhood trauma, it's 3 times more risk for heart disease and lung cancer, and 7 out of 10 leading causes of death, and how trauma can also alter your genes and your genetics. So I began to like read a bunch of different articles, which I have listed here, that sort of informed my thinking. And then also looking at how we know trauma can have physical effects in the body, and also like this rise of self-care. And also at the same time, we're in a society where it's ever more present to be extremely busy, and to be busy means you're successful. And so what is that kind of saying about us if we're sort of ignoring that space to kind of just be patient and listen to our body and heal? And then I sort of also was looking at non-Western cultures, like in Nigeria, Igon Igon, which is a festival that is held where it's sort of believed on that day or that time that the ancestors will embody a dancer, and they will perform and dance and be among the living type of thing. So also looking at how like our ancestors influence the experiences that we have today and how we may go forward. So that was sort of like my thinking. And so from there, I sort of built out a mood board of basically what I wanted the visuals to look like, what I wanted the references to be, especially because when making visual work, I think it's super important for a cohesive look. So to do that, I sort of built like a color palette with visuals, and was looking at other artists that sort of influenced my work and basically what I wanted to achieve. So making the visuals, I used several different softwares: Adobe, Photoshop, Premiere, After Effects, Blender, which is free, Sculptress, which is a modeling software that's also free, Modulate, and Mad Mapper. And so the picture on the back is me working on a visual for the heart in Blender. Yeah, so basically I from then sort of kind of drew a loose sketch of my own body and sort of segmented different parts and sort of just wrote whatever came to mind about my own memories, how I think I could present that in ways that would make sense to me. And so a lot of times when I come to crafting visuals, I've noticed I'll start with a very like concrete thing and then warp it so much to the point where it's kind of like overly distorted. And I still kind of figuring out why that's something I do, but I'm kind of very interested in like following that route. So this one was for the memory association for my nose. And like being a kid, I remember being in elementary school and I went to a predominantly white high school and like white elementary school and being told like my nose looks like a bull. And so that's kind of why I take a lot of free PNGs and things like that, and I'll alter them or draw in shapes like I did in this corner over here. And then I'll bring that from Photoshop into After Effects and sort of alter this here into sort of a warping, moving visual. And then from there, I brought that video back into the Mad Mapper. And that's where I have the mesh you can see on this top part here, which is what kind of helps the mesh is just to make it look like it's more sort of wrapping around the head. So it's not just as flat, but obviously, well, not obviously, but the method that I'm using for the projection mapping is like a more crude one because I am still like learning this and doing the mapping. I'm hoping like one day I'll be able to soon get to the point where I can like build the projections off of 3D models of objects. So this is also just very like fun as well to sort of build the object that I was going to be mapping on. So I hand stitched a doll that was the exact measurements of my own physical form to also sort of simulate the idea of an extension of myself and my body and my experiences. And so that was just kind of like odd but comforting to see something that really was like a copy of you. And so a lot of times too in my work, I'll sort of start with simple shapes or colors and then move from there. And so for a lot of my visuals, I'll end up building my own kind of like GIFs or PNGs. So like you can see here in Photoshop, this is like a timeline I've built, making just like a circle shape and sort of warping it and then playing it back and forth until you get this here. And then this visual is one I constructed for the knee, since my association with my knees are sort of like being a kid and always kind of like rolling around and falling down and getting scraped and kind of scuffed. So I did sort of this blowing grass hair, and these are just flower PNGs. It's a well that I made from taking pictures of flowers in my yard and then going back into Photoshop, masking everything, cutting it out. And then this photo here in the left-hand corner is just basically the cutout that I had for the doll, for the hands and everything that I did. And so, yeah, it's been a very like, I don't know if enlightening process is the right word, but sort of reflective process for me, just because while making the visuals, for example, like this one, which is a visual for the heart, took me like about a whole week to really kind of plan out and do. And I've noticed while making some of the videos with certain memories or associations, like I find myself coming up into places of resistance as I allow myself to remember, which in a way is sort of therapeutic, but also like, it's like, I can't think of the word, but it's like scratching a good itch. It's just sort of like, okay, like I know this now, didn't know that then. So I modeled the rabbit skull for my heart visual in Sculptress, and then I brought it into Blender and basically set up a rig and lighted it, and that's why it just looks like it's turning around in a circle. And so to do this model, I just brought in pictures of a rabbit and just kind of split my screen and like looked at them as I built the skull from scratch, I guess you could say. And so again, I think I guess I mentioned, basically when I do my visuals, I tend to just pull a lot of different images and things and sort of throw them together and kind of alter them and warp them. So one of my favorite visuals that I constructed was the one was like the visuals for my butt, which is kind of an odd thing, like to be like, why is that your favorite? But I think for me it was just because when I think of like my butt or my backside, I have a lot of like gender dysphoria there with that because of the way I physically look on the outside. I will kind of always be a default female, and so that was sort of something how I kind of like wanted to kind of deconstruct that aspect, and also looking at how a lot of the times like curves in women, even if you're like not wearing anything super revealing, you're sort of kind of like catcalled or kind of on the chopping block. And so I was like, what's something that I feel like is kind of always for consumption? And I was like, meat, cows. So I took a bunch of pictures of this cow rug that we have. If it will let me full screen, I don't know if it will. Okay, it won't. But I took a bunch of pictures of this cow rug in our house. And then on top of it, I took about like 12 different videos of just like mukbangs and like competitive eating competitions and just like YouTubers who like all they do is just consume like ungodly portions of food, and sort of that act of like engorging yourself with more and just wanting more, and sort of how I feel like a lot of the time those with like assigned female at birth or like women are often kind of felt like they are for consumption, even if when they're not. And so that's sort of what I played around with here, was taking those visuals, I threw them into Premiere, chopped them up, and then brought them back into After Effects to sort of make this like geometric warping pattern with the lines that you see going on here. And so it just like was really, I don't know, something about seeing like the trend of like watching people just like eat food and like this that's kind of obsessiveness of like more and wanting more and filling. So that was sort of like one that I worked on that I ended up really kind of enjoying how it turned out, despite like the memory and the associations that I have for that part of myself. And so while making the project to sort of synthesize like everything, after I consume a lot of information, the best thing that I do is like I write. And so this is just like on the right here, sort of a segment from a poem that I wrote after I did all of my research to kind of help me like bring everything together. So it's, this healing cannot be commodified, but it can be passed down the line. The fates have held tenderly with quivering scissors as the antidote in amber pensia thickens the will to live. As I cry, not just for myself, these shoulders heave with the weight of God, silenced by men named in the echoes of Christopher Columbus. I cry for all of us. Oh, how daring the chorus shouts to alter this transaction of healing. When you have sex with me, let it not be a transaction or a heterosexual union, but neutral in between two energies of twirl. The orgy of healing, the rebellion of loving, the protest of ecstasy. As my mind, my heart, my body, my soul have sighed long ago, we can exist in everything and nothing, a ripple reflection of time. And so while writing that, that was kind of me like taking everything from like ancestral tradition to just the history of trauma and generational trauma. And I think I kind of also like soaked up everything that was kind of going on at the time with George Floyd and all the killings and the social unrest and uprising that we have seen at like a scale not really since the civil rights movement. And so I think that also is definitely sort of in the writing that I had, because I think a lot of the times like I didn't really realize until everything kind of like happened with George Floyd, like how much I had really soaked up from what was going on, and how I really had just like needed that space to cry, not just for myself, but for everyone who came before me and like people who will happen to again, and sort of that cycle that you want to break, but you can't, but it's also like a cycle your body remembers. And so then on the left side here, this is just a visual. Wow, 360, oh, there you go, okay, 1080. This is just part of the projection mapping that I did for the visuals for my thighs. So then you can see the doll there in the red with the visual on the legs here. And so originally I had wanted to set the doll up outside, but I didn't have that capability because I realized as I was projection mapping, I had way too many things plugged in and we just didn't have the outlets. So I kind of set it up into my room and then did it from there. And so this is just a small clip of the full film I made. Like, it's like around 12 to 13 minutes. And I'll post that onto my website and also share it with Laboratory Residency so you guys can watch it. Hopefully everything should be up by Monday, but I basically kind of went through in a narrative form and outlined all the visuals alongside my body parts. And so that's just this segment of this clip here. Yeah, and then so the audio you hear in the background is I produced that. So basically in Ableton, I said the poem like 3 different times and then sort of staggered them. So it felt like a chorus kind of like swirling around you. And then when I was working in Mad Mapper, and I brought one of the clips that had the audio attached to it, it started playing it backwards. And I kind of liked how garbled and like messed up it sounded, and kind of again harkening back to like that thing that I've noticed I've done where I'll take something sort of like right side up and just warp it completely. But that's basically the project that I did and that I have, and I've really learned a lot just about myself, and also like really wanted to push myself with this work that I was doing to not just sort of scratch like the surface level of what I wanted to do, but I'm really hoping to create a lot of larger scale works in the future as well, and possibly doing work, if I do projection based art, with dancers or like fashion people with like clothing and projecting onto like clothing and wigs and stuff like that. But as of like after the project, I'm probably going to be focusing on like 3D modeling and sort of experimental coding and stuff for web. But that is my project, and I hope you guys enjoy. Let's stop sharing. Okay, cool. And I will give this back to Kirsten. Okay, alrighty. There you go. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sane. That was wonderful. Yay. So we're gonna go ahead and move into our Q&A section, which our resident assistant, Sarah, will be moderating. So I'm going to pass it over to her. And Sarah will have to unmute each artist. So as you maybe all the artists leave yourselves unmuted just to make it easier. Perfect.
All right, perfect. Hi guys, again, I'm Sarah Torres. I'm the resident assistant, and I've also been watching the progress of all of these amazing artists throughout their stay. So first, I just wanted to say thank you to you guys for all of your work, and it's been the best to watch these projects come to life. So there were a few questions that I was able to pick up in the chat. And so I'll ask you guys those ones first, and then we'll get to some other questions that I have for you. And then if you guys have more questions that come to mind as they're answering, you can just throw those in the chat as well. So let's see, first, LaJuné, I will unmute you. And there was a question. I'll have to find you. There we go. I'm asking to unmute you. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Hi. So let's see. It looks like Sene had a question when you were going through your presentation. Do you build your models from scratch, or does a software create them from photos or the movement?
Yeah, so I don't make my models from scratch. So for this past experience that I made, I used DAZ 3D. But then I used that with a mix of a software called FaceGen. So I took photos of Ntu, and I took photos front facing and side profile, and then I uploaded those into the software, and then it compiled them to create a face. And then from there, it sent that face to DAZ. The only, I think, downfall with DAZ as a software is that it doesn't let you change too many parameters about the body. So you would have to take that avatar and then put it into another software, maybe Maya, or a blender or something like that, and then change all of the parameters of the body there. So yeah.
Oh, so cool. The next one came from Lee. Have you combined this with live performance yet too?
Yeah, so it started as a live performance last year. So basically, I got all the movements from last year's performance. It was a live motion capture performance, so I was recording the motion capture data in real time with an audience present. And then from there, from those recordings, some of them you couldn't really use, some of them you could use. But from those recordings, I was able to create the newer animations for the video and for the VR experience.
Perfect, very cool. It looks like Arcos Dance says, curious in the artists, can you talk about your experience of third space virtual community during this residency? Do you feel deepened connections anywhere, or that your community expanded? And there's a couple more, so I'll let you have those two first. Oh, and LaJuné, I've got you unmuted, so you can go ahead and answer that one first if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I made some really great connections. I always love experiences like this because for me, I'm always I just love diving into different communities. I am based in New York, so it was just so cool to have this opportunity on the West Coast, and sort of being there but not being there. So yeah, that was dope. Honestly, I thought that was really amazing. And also just meeting more people there. I think my favorite, it shouldn't be my favorite part, but because this is not a great, this is not a good thing. Quarantine's not good, but my I guess the cool, I don't know even how to say this, because it is a good thing for me, not a good thing for me all the ways, but it's not in all the ways, but in this way it is. So anyway, that said, I've just been so excited about the opportunity to meet people from all over the US, the world. This is just good for that. So yeah, that's what I really enjoyed through this opportunity. Yeah.
Nice. There was one more question to it. Were you more or less lonely working from home as opposed to physical residency? I mean, you kind of,
Yeah, no, I mean, for me personally, like I was talking about this a little bit earlier, but you know, I have been like a freelancer and an artist, just like living as this for the past 2 years. So like I haven't had any like jobby job. I'm calling it jobby jobs. Like don't judge me, but like I haven't had any jobby jobs for the past 2 years. Okay, and I don't plan on having any more jobby jobs in my future. Um, but yeah, I feel like this. I was just saying before, like before this whole this entire video chat, like I've been like just working towards this my whole life. Like I always either work from home or I'm like going to a residency space or grant space. So like the difference would be like I am not, you know, there with y'all. I'm like just here at home, just working on my stuff personally. But yeah, I mean, I have been able to continue creating connections with people. Yeah. All right.
Good. Yeah. Well, let's see. The next person I'm going to unmute. I'm going to mute you again. And then it looks like there were a couple questions for Ntu. I'm going to ask to unmute you.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for presenting. Let's see. So the first one that I captured from the chat was, how did you add the song to the structure? I think you know which one we were talking about. It looks like it was around the tallest one, and you walk up to it, and there's a song.
Yeah, so that was one of the least fun parts about this project. That had to do with coding, basically. And I think it just overall, like getting into doing this space, I was like, you know, I love design. I love placing things, you know, in areas, making things look pretty, particles, you know, leaves falling and all that stuff. But the coding part where like you actually make this stuff responsive is like, you know, the nuts and bolts, and that part's really boring. It's like I don't like it, but it makes stuff cool. So yeah, so basically I like looked this up, and with like with coding stuff, I didn't necessarily know when like learning this, I didn't know like what it meant when it was saying like, I don't know, like world, like this is like the class that it's in, but just like how it works. And so for that particular structure, how I basically set it up is that Unity uses scripts, and it uses C# as like a language. So what I would do is I would write these scripts in what's it called? I wasn't Microsoft Visualizer, or maybe it was like Visualizer Studio, and then I would basically put these scripts like in these like structures. Like it would be like kind of under a folder, and so what it would allow that to do is say when you go up to this thing, like this audio will start, and then specifically how I programmed that one is it works within like a field. Like if you were to see it kind of in the design view, it's like a sphere, and so when you walk out of the sphere, the music pauses, and then when you walk back into it, it plays again. And yeah, so you would kind of have that there, and then you can easily like drag and drop the audio that you want to play, just like from your music library.
Oh, that's cool. Well, this relates to the next one. So
Yes.
this next question is, what was the visual aesthetic for, or the reference for the structures themselves?
Yeah, so the structures themselves, at first I started building with like this kind of like these prefabs that Unity like gave out for you, but it wasn't super expressive. So it kind of works like this thing that I know maybe like a couple musicians in here know, like splice, like where it's like where you can like grab samples. So some of the structures like I had to piece together, but a lot of them were from kind of like a, what do you call them? Like kind of like a folder. Like you can download it and you can put it together how you like. And specifically, I wanted it to kind of go with like that natural feel like kind of feel congruous with that. But also kind of have like just this out of time kind of feeling to it, where it doesn't feel like it's placed in any specific area. You just know it's like ruins, you know, stone. But other than that, like for it to be like a more natural environment, I just thought about, I was really thinking, you know, during this time, everybody wants to be outside, you know, everybody, or I think most people do, like they miss the outside. And even with like nightlife spaces, that's something that I learned in Berlin, is that there are like nightclubs where there are outsides to them, which I didn't know about in the US. There's specifically this club called Griechmühle, rest in peace, because it closed down while I was there. But it had like an outdoors area. And that also kind of encouraged like this idea of it being a communal space, because there's not music happening there, but there was like a bonfire. So, you know, it encourages like people to talk to each other.
Yeah, I'm definitely missing those spaces.
Yeah.
What was that?
But I was just saying, yeah.
Oh, no worries. So before I switch to our next artist, Saint A, I'm going to ask you the last, you know, that last chunk from Arco saying,
Yes.
do you feel that your connections were deepened anywhere? You know, were you more or less lonely working from?
Yeah. So like right before this residency started, I released like a project, and that's like some of the music I was working with in this project. And I started connecting with, yeah, just like a bunch of new people through that music, which was really cool. Like it was like, I was like talking to people from Japan and stuff who were into it and like sending me emails and stuff. And so that was really interesting, especially because before that I felt like the fastest way that I built connections with people in terms of music was like live experiences, like playing shows. And then now that I had this like first project, which was something that people could like return to and think about and talk with me about, that was something also to connect with. That was something to connect to people through. And yeah, so I feel like it's a different type of community has been deepened there that I wouldn't even get in person necessarily, because they're so far away, but I hope to meet them. And then in terms of feeling more or less lonely, I do pretty well like by myself. I think I like always have. There were honestly days would go by and I would be inside. And yeah, it just felt like kind of, I mean, I think a lot of the work that we do is very, it like demands a lot of focused attention to your computer. Like, and so I think we're used to that, and to kind of be given like time to explore that through residency has been good. Yeah, it's just really about like really tuning in to like what you're doing. So yeah.
Yeah, the solitude is good for anything that needs all of your focus and lots of time as a silver lining. So thank you for those responses. And now I have a few questions for you guys. And I see someone in the chat wondering if you can still throw some questions out. Yes, please do. And I'll ask them as you throw them in there. So I'm gonna mute you, my friend, and unmute. We're ready. Perfect. How are you? Thank you for showing, you know, your, I've never seen anything like that. It was really cool. My first question for you, let's see. I think, what process elements have you enjoyed the most in the creation of this project that you'll bring into the next one? And after listening to you today, I'm really excited to know that you're wanting to do the projections and the mapping onto, I think you said 3D, like 3D printed models or something to that effect. So if you could talk about that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I guess from this project, something that I'd like to take is like that kind of process of research, which I feel like a lot of the times like can go missed when you're doing like an art project. You can just be like, I got this idea, I have to go straight into it. So a lot of times I would read a bunch of information or like listen to different podcasts or just like TED Talks that sort of related to what I was saying. And then I would sort of sit and just journal. Sorry, I would just journal for about like 30 minutes afterwards. And then I would sort of take whatever I wrote there. And it really helped me sort of like clarify my own thoughts and like my ideas. And I would end up kind of building blocks to like new pathways. So it's definitely something I want to take into whatever project I do next. And then, yeah, so the prediction mapping for like the 3D models is like, you can have like, I don't know, I guess I'll just use like a pair of headphones, and then you make a 3D model of the headphones, and then you use that basically as like the map, not that I don't want to use a map, but basically as like the skeleton to create the projection mapping. So that way when you do projection map it onto like an object like this, you get more of that really like clean kind of wrapped around look, which is something I kind of want to play with, since I would love to do like kind of cool like sculpture things, or again like maybe some like abstract fashiony like type stuff. I think that'd be really cool. I'm just always curious at like trying and playing around more.
Awesome. That's so exciting. I can't wait to watch you get to that. And then since you haven't gotten to answer that other question that the other two artists got to answer, let's see, I gotta find it in the chat because we have a new one. Well, maybe I'll read this new one for you. To an extent, and this is a question for everybody, each of you are documenting and cataloging Black movement, effect, and terrain or space, and you're each doing it through highly technical platforms that you have been trained yourselves in. And you're doing this in an age where the technical and conceptual stakes of capturing Black life feel extremely pressing. And you're doing this work in a nation that simply does not train Black people and people of color more broadly in digital technologies. Can you reflect on how it is felt to do your skilled technical and conceptual labor now during a pandemic and ongoing social racial unrest? How does it feel to labor in these ways that are allegedly at odds with stereotypes of what Black people and Black artists are presumed to be able to do? He says it's long, sorry, but that's a great question. I'll let you have that.
It's a good question. Oh, I think reflect on what it has been. I think definitely at first, like going into the project and just doing something that was like technical and like art, I felt like, is this really even kind of like worth it or important, sort of giving everything that's going on right now? And so I really kind of had to like take that step back to just sort of like, I don't know, that is the word, I can't think of the word, but kind of do that and then sort of come back to the table and sort of look at like how is what I'm doing sort of kind of helping the narrative of like what it is to be a Black person, and just also like the Black imagination. And I think a lot of the times when you are a Black person who is doing something that is maybe not what like white society has sort of boxed you into do, you can experience backlash, I think, not just like from the outsider, but like within your own community. But at the same time, again, I think that sort of is one of those things that's like pertinent and important to do because of that idea of like Black imagination and allowing for Blackness to be something that is like multifaceted and constantly shape-shifting and changing, and allows for that room and space to sort of like go beyond of what has been prescribed. If that, I think, yeah, that's what I want to say.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I can understand that, and it's kind of like stripping those limited beliefs about what Black people can be or people of color can be. So I'm going to mute you, and I'm going to come back to LaJuné. There we go. Hi.
Okay. Hi. Yeah. Okay. I think that for me, it's been very much like a roller coaster. I just say that. Like to get like a bit personal, like I realized that like before this quarantine period, that I had started this project, Black Movement Project, 2 years ago. So like that's just like the timeline of this piece, and well, this library process, and right now, so I realized that